Okay, for the radio audience, please tell us who you are, where you are right now, and what you're trying to do with your songwriting.
I am Courtney Marie Andrews. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, and just trying to write songs uh, when they feel right to write.
I mean, many people, I think, when they go through breakups, when they go through trauma, when they go through some sort of life transformation, right? It's like there's a few ways to process it, right? Therapy, maybe you talk to your friends, maybe you get drunk, right? Um, the distillation process for you, does it take years? Does it take moments? Like when a song sort of starts to trickle in about a particular pain point, let's say, do you think like they come more through the hourglass of time or actually more immediate?
uh, I go through periods of like extreme exodus of songs. Um, they do seem to coincide with times of personal turmoil. It's a way to sort of process things that happen, but I do what I call chunk writing kind of regardless of what I'm going through. Sometimes it's a lot easier when I have a lot to talk about, but um, I will write, like for instance, this past month I wrote 30 songs in a month.
Whew.
And then I probably won't write for a while. For like 2 or 3 months, I'll be dry. So that's just kind of how I've always operated for whatever reason. I have like a huge kind of big chunk of writing that I do, and then I sort of kind of take a step back from it.
It's always funny to me when I get back from a tour or something and I'm really exhausted and I'm like, I just don't want to, I don't want to see my guitar. I don't want to think about songs. And then it lasts for what, like 3 hours or something. And then
Yeah,
like my wife like is like, I'm gonna be gone for a while. And I'm like, and then I'm like by myself, like in the room, and you're like, all right, maybe.
yeah,
And like that's almost the point where like out of that exhaustion where you think nothing is gonna come, where everything comes in some way, like
yeah,
that emptiness.
yeah. But you're not trying to focus on you're when you're exhausted. I feel like you can channel things in a different way because you're not so hyper focused on things and nitpicking.
30 songs in a month. That almost feels like clocking in like at the factory in a way. Like going like, you know what? I gotta manufacture the next piece of this puzzle.
Yeah, I mean that was a particular intense kind of release of material, but it's not always that abundant. But this past one was for whatever reason.
I was playing my mom who's in town, Loose Future, walking on the beach. And she's a diehard Linda Ronstadt acolyte, I would say. And she hasn't probably listened to any new music like on her own for probably 30 years. Like she doesn't know where to seek it out, doesn't try to seek it out. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know. But like this this is for you. Like I feel like this is like your voice is like for her, you know? And she was like, yeah, all right.
Aw. That's sweet.
And I think that there's something about I don't know, the natural ache in your voice, even on the more upbeat sort of forward thinking songs on this record, right? I think this Loose Future project feels like a release from a lot of past burdens, past fear and angst, and just being like, I don't need plans. I need to like focus on the good times that are actually happening in front of me right now, which
Mm,
is really hard. I mean, and you say, towards the end of the record, like it's strange feeling this good sometimes. Like I'm not used to feeling okay in my own brain or something.
yeah.
How do you reconcile those two sides of yourself on this record? The the place where you're almost safe. Whoop, Did I lose you? No, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Where do you reconcile yourself in those two places on this record? Like the safe uh, feeling of uh, almost the safe feeling of sadness as a writing tool versus the uncomfortable truth of just like being present and being okay
Mm.
and happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because this record, what I think of like now when I think of these songs is like this hesitation to like accept good things, um, to
Yeah.
accept like love that is not tainted or, you know, hard or complicated. I mean, all love is complicated, but just those moments, to feel kind of comfortable in them has always been hard for me. And so, writing wise, how did I reconcile it? I don't know. It was just the place that I was. I'd kind of finally processed a very long breakup and had started dating somebody when I was writing this record. And it just felt like I was between a past kind of self and a transforming self. And it was this record to me is kind of like I was walking the line. If I was hesitant, uh, but also feeling good, and but also not forgetting how bad it can feel as well. So
Yeah, because I think if you've had your heart broken once, twice, a million times, it feels like when things are so honeymoon period that
yeah.
it's a waterfall that's about to crest and
Hmm.
then you're going to tumble down, and the falling is thrilling, but also you know these are the good old days. That song has that bubbly almost 50s rock and roll vibe, but that 50s rock and roll thing always has a hint of like
Sadness.
darkness, like if this person leaves me, I will die. It's
Yeah.
like those old doo-wop songs, like everything that I feel right now could be ripped away if this
Yeah.
person changes their mind.
Yeah. 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 I think that's definitely a lot of the thematically this record is definitely writing all that writing that line. So
And you're from Phoenix originally?
I am, yes.
Like Phoenix is not one of those places where you're like, yeah, the artistic hotbed of talent, Phoenix, Arizona. But there's got to be a bunch of people. Like, who are the other people that who came out of there, or are there other folks who?
Um, Phoenix is actually like growing up, I always knew a lot of like visual artists. Like Arizona has so
Mm.
many painters and visual artists. And when I was growing up, there was like a kind of a little folk scene. I used to throw this folk festival when I was a teenager, and there's like 10 songwriters around my age, varying between 8 years older and like a couple years younger. And yeah, I mean, there was definitely a lot of like songwriters at the time when I was coming up. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like, it's always been a place where kind of DIY or punk forms from because it's so not an artistic place in a lot of ways. So I feel like you have to sort of fight to be a freak in the place, which kind of creates, I think, even more of a freak. Like, if like in a city of full of freaks, it's like, okay, you're just like any Joe Schmo. But if you're like in Phoenix and you're trying to be an artist, it's like you are different and you are fighting against the current.
Right.
You know.
That's like when I remember I talked to John McCrae from Cake, and the coolest thing about that band for me, I mean, I love their music and I think they're incredibly underrated actually, but that they never, even when they had like radio hits and kind of big selling records, they always like stayed in Sacramento. They like never relocated or like signed on some big label or had anyone produce their stuff. They just like, no, we made it like in our backyard studio and pretty much for Sacramento.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, wow, that's pretty punk rock.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not trying to live the LA life or anything, just Staying true. I mean, there's a million ways to be an artist, right? Everybody has a different path and story and background. Um, I think I read a quote once. It was like, I'm paraphrasing, but you truly don't, you know, it. There are great artists in every form, from wealthy families, from poor families, from, um, you know, your background doesn't choose great art.
Well, I think it's not a choice at a certain point, right? I mean, being a touring artist, especially, and you've toured pretty hard for the last decade, um, it's not like an easy life.
Yeah.
And there's no guarantee that anyone will continue to care about the work you put out, especially if you're not like the new up and coming artist, right? Um, and I think that what you've created, with Old Flowers and Honest Life, it's like a very personal snapshot of these parts of your life that people can somehow kind of drop themselves into. Um, and look, if you've had a breakup, if you've had uh, those moments where you need to really like process something, um, those records I think are super powerful, and people felt that, which is great. I mean, do you feel like people come up to you, or at least when you were touring on uh Old Flowers especially, that people were like using you as like a therapist or something, like were people
Um, that record,
sounding off?
yeah, that record particularly does have a lot of people telling me personal moments attached to the record. Um, like, oh, this was, if I told was on our wedding playlist, or I went through a breakup and this record really helped me. That record specifically was like very connected in that way to my audience.
It is amazing, I mean, when folks connect themselves to your lyrics, especially, and I mean, I've had grown men sort of come up to me in the middle of the street and be like, this song that you wrote about the car crash, I cry every time I hear it driving my truck, and it's like I've never met this person, and it's obviously why you hope to create art. But I think there's an uncomfortable truth, especially in how mm, music is presented from a publicity standpoint, from a capitalist standpoint. Like, the more trauma and the more hurt that Courtney feels, the more we want to listen, or like the more we want to talk about it,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
how much pain did you feel on Together or Alone,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and I mean, and that's sort of, I guess, the price you pay. It's like, I'm presenting this pain for you
yeah,
every night on
yeah,
stage with a light on me.
yeah. Well, it's the human experience. I think you have to love that. You have to love relaying your human experience as a songwriter. Um, and luckily, I feel the songs I sing every night, but luckily I feel like once I've kind of recorded them, they're not mine anymore. And I
Mm,
can sometimes feel the emotions that I had when I wrote them, but I don't want to say that I feel detached when I'm singing them, but I'm not like reopening the wound every night unless something personal is happening in my life that is
uh-huh.
kind of reinvigorating those feelings. It's like I can sing them without dying every night,
Yeah.
without just being obliterated. So I think you kind of have to, like, for survival. It's like a doctor that needs to sort of always, like, they can't see death all the time in a way, or they can't, like, I mean, they can see death, but they can't feel it. They can't feel everyone in the way that a family member would, or something. As a songwriter, you kind of have to, like, remove yourself from the initial feeling in some ways.
There's a through line between that song Together or Alone from Old Flowers and the song, I think at the end of your record, um, Change My Mind,
Hmm.
where you don't believe this person that you're falling for or who loves you, right? I didn't
Mm-hmm.
believe a word you said, but I loved those pretty lies. And then on Change My Mind, and on Change My Mind, something deep inside me like won't believe you. Like I
Mm.
don't recognize the way you see me and the way you love me. I don't believe that this can be this real and this awesome, you know?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's also like a something that happens when you're young and in love too. Is that you don't believe that somebody could love you because maybe you don't believe that you love yourself.
Right.
So I feel like a lot of that belief is like it's like a worry, like how could somebody, risk it all, if yeah, it's a real feeling. I feel like a lot of us feel.
Well, I think the masochistic thing that songwriters do sometimes when they fall over the edge of being fully in love with someone and committing is you would think like, oh, you'd write the sweetest love song. But like, I think when I realized that my now wife and I were going to be like a real lasting thing, I wrote that car crash song, right? It's like the saddest, most horrifying possible ending that you really don't want to have to experience. Almost like I had to like get it out.
Yeah.
And then people are like, oh, well, that must have really hurt you, this event that happened. You're like, no, no, it's like it could have happened.
Yeah.
And I hope it doesn't ever happen. And that's
Yeah.
almost like when you love someone so much, it's like the fear of losing them, the fear of them disappearing is also on the other side of that
Mm,
love, you know?
yeah. I really do believe that like once you've experienced like immense heartbreak that you can always bring it up. Like
Yeah.
since experiencing it myself, I feel like even, when I've fallen in love, after that, um, and when I fall in love, whenever that is again, I, I will like, I'll be able to always like drum up that, those feelings, if I need to. But I think that there's something really beautiful and challenging about writing songs like a true love song or like emotions that aren't touched or like lauded, like you were saying, like people are almost obsessed by pain in a way. And I think that there are pain and love, these are topics that run throughout the veins of everybody, but I feel like that there are so many emotions yet to be explored in writing, and the greatest writers that I love explore all of them, you know?
Do you remember the first love song you ever wrote for like a teenage crush? Was that a thing?
You know, I, yeah, one of my first, but there was never like a love, it was never like a sweet love song. Unfortunately, my first love song was called Morbid Love.
Go on.
I don't remember what it's about, but you can probably sense that it was,
Vampires?
yeah. It was a very emo child, punk emo child. No, I think that I think I started writing from a place of longing from the beginning. I think I longed quite heavily as a kid. I spent a lot of time as a teenager alone. I raised myself because my mother had two jobs and I was an only child. And so I wrote to long, and I never quite could grasp the thing, like the you know, it was like what invigorated my writing was like something I didn't have,
Mm.
and so like getting to a place where I can write comfortably about things that I have and are so abundant and beautiful in my life has been a challenge. Because I literally started writing because I was longing
Mm.
for something, for love, for connection, for friendship. And also, one of my best friends had this guy kind of running around on her when we were in like high school. And like one of my first songs was like a song about him and how he kind of, you know, was screwing around. It was called like Five Girl World or something stupid like that. But it was like, it, I wanted to write about the kind of darker underbelly of things, and was always more interested in things people didn't have or things people longed for, or like the whole picture and not being Hallmark. I don't think I've ever been interested in like Hallmark kind of love. I want the real stuff. And so I like to write about the real stuff.
Well, I mean, definitely the emo sensibility is almost like coming back into fashion somehow, you know, that kind of angsty, like, ah, I want it so bad,
Yeah.
but I can't have it.
Yeah.
And, obviously you were a part of the Jimmy Eat World universe for a bit there. Did you think that you would be as a songwriter in this more folk Americana world, or did you see yourself being in a more rock pop place?
No, I didn't think about genre. I really just thought I was a songwriter, and publicists put me where they thought I should be, you know? So it wasn't like I'm gonna be an Americana artist. Like it was
Yeah.
like, I just loved great songwriting, and wanted to make records that were timeless, and still do, and hope to continue to make records that are timeless and like, or if I am, I don't know if they will be, but I hope so, and I think I just want to like, my goal is to just be a songwriter that writes great songs. And people classify that one way or the other, and that makes it easier for them, then so be it.
For those of you listening at home, Courtney is wearing I want to say a hand crocheted hat and possibly a hand crocheted sweater, which, firmly places her in the Americana silo somehow.
Oh, I don't
Or,
know about
or
that, but okay.
they're like, look, she's wearing a crocheted hat. She must be kind of folky. Or maybe it's the most punk rock thing ever. I don't know. What did you learn from being in that Jimmy Eat World kind of on that stage? Like what kind of seeped in there?
Well, I was a child. I was 19 years old, and I was like just doing basically like Greyhound bus tours, and my own kind of DIY booked like tours and stuff. And then I went from literally on the Greyhound bus, got a call from them, and was like, "Do you want to come be in our band as like a backup singer?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And so they taught me everything I knew about the industry. I didn't know, I literally did not know what it meant to be in the music industry. Um, I thought it was like something as simple as kind of like hitchhiking around and playing for people in cafes. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really ever think of it as like this operation, or didn't know it was an operation until they took me out. So they taught, I was a kid, I was like 19, so they taught me a lot, about how it all works, you know?
I mean, I think there's really great lessons to be learned when you're a young person going out there. I think it's not I would say hard touring is a young person's game in a way, right? Like I feel like now as we are in our mid 30s, me lurching towards 40, the idea that like, oh yeah, I used to sleep on people's floors and couches, and like I'm glad I did that.
Yeah.
And um I don't know if I could do that now, you
No.
know.
Yeah, I'm glad I did that in my 20s too. There's a lot of people that start out later and it's not as, it's not quite possible.
But
Uh,
also like the idealism of being a young person, be like, I don't care who books us or where it is.
Yeah.
We're playing, and someone will be listening.
Yeah.
Anyone will be listening. And that was so like important,
Yeah.
And do you have a first um show moment in your mind where you felt like, wait a second, like something really special is happening here, where people were really starting to come to hear your words and your songs?
Um, I think like I will the very first time that happened was really shocking. I just released Honest Life and I went over to Europe and I'd gotten to play Jules Holland and I had booked this tour, this my agent had booked me a tour and I showed up to Cardiff, Wales and there was 130 people there and it was sold out and I was like I'd never experienced that. And really could not believe it that there were people there to see me because they'd heard my music.
Mm,
It was because up until that moment, I think it was like 27, 26, no, like 26.
mm-hmm.
Up until that moment, I really, I didn't play it. There's never anybody at my shows unless I was opening for somebody locally in Seattle, or I did a couple opening tours of Damien Jurado, and played in his band and that sort of thing. But never had I experienced a show of mine in a foreign country, nonetheless, like where people just showed up. And it was a wild feeling. I couldn't believe it.
That song "Rookie Dreaming" on Honest Life, I think, captures that hard traveling, sort of town to town, maybe that Greyhound bus tour feeling,
Yeah.
with the choir on the train, like almost like you're like a nameless troubadour going from town to town, like selling your wares, you know,
Yeah.
because it does feel like we're traveling salesmen sometimes.
Yeah. It does.
After shows, you're like, would you like a trinket to take home?
Yeah. Yeah. My friend Amy always used to say, meet me in the gift shop afterwards.
Yeah. Where do you think the most surprising audience or following that you've built is? Is it in Europe, or do you feel like there's a town that uh, for some reason is obsessed with you?
Mm. Yeah, I've done really well over in Europe and the UK and I guess Sweden is a surprise. Sweden's always really great to go to. Um, but yeah, I just feel lucky to be able to go anywhere and have people show up. Kind of still blows my mind, you know.
Yeah, it's fun to it was fun to go to Sweden because our trombone player is from Stockholm, and he comes from this family where his father was a famous conductor over there, and a lot of these like kind of very genteel classical uh music people will come to our shows, and then he's playing this very kind of body soul funk trombone, and they're like, oh my. Because
Yeah.
they knew his dad is this like guy who interpreted Bach and Beethoven,
Yeah.
and it's a funny juxtaposition. And yeah, Scandinavia is awesome. I wish we could just have like a nice tunnel from LA right to Stockholm.
Yeah.
It's a little far away,
Yeah. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you wrote a lot of these songs on Loose Future in like was it like a shack in Cape Cod? Did I read that right?
Yeah, my friend had this little shack that she was staying in Wellfleet, and I started writing it there, quarantining with her. So it was a very inspiring place. It was, you could walk to the beach in 10 minutes, and it was like a perfect place to be for that time. So,
Do you start writing without pen and paper or with your phone? Do you start humming to yourself? Do you have it sort of um do melodies come without guitar, piano first, or do you have the chords first?
Both. A lot lately it's been on walks. I'll walk and think of a line or a song and then go home and write with the guitar. But I've written like entire songs on walks without a guitar.
Where did Loose Future, like that concept, hit you?
That was actually that started out by a phrase. I was dating somebody for a bit, and we were joking when we first started dating, like, you never know, it's a loose future. I said that out loud, and then we both laughed, and we were like, that should be a song. And I went home and wrote it with my friend Kate, like a couple months later.
I think the scariest part, I think, as we uh, realize that we're not young people anymore, is that the future is still vast, right? People live to 90 to 100. You look at your parents and how they ended up, right? For good or for bad. And you can see how like the fork in the road starts to form, right? I can become like my dad or not, you know. And there's things where I think as a kid you're like, yeah, of course I want to be like my dad, and then you're like, wait a second, no you don't.
Yeah.
Probably want to do your own thing. um does your mom have a relationship with your music?
I have no idea how I mean, my mother took me to this karaoke bar when I was a kid called Mr. Lucky's, and I used to sing there every Friday night for the Friday Night Fish Fry in Phoenix, Arizona. It was this kind of legendary, like, country western bar that a lot of you know crazy famous singers had sang out over the years. And I went there and just fell in love with singing. I just started, doing karaoke, singing songs, sang Annie the Orphan songs and that sort of thing. But my mother wasn't a musician or anything. Either was my dad. Um, my dad's side has a very big interest. They were old kind of hippies that traveled around and went to concerts and that sort of thing. So they have a deep knowledge of music. On my dad's side, they're all big music fans. But yeah, in general, I just don't know why I became a musician. It just wasn't. My mom worked at Walmart and then Target, and my dad is a roofer. So I have no idea how I became a musician.
I mean,
I really do think that they're
why
both
not?
repressed, artists in some
Hmm.
ways. Where like they're both like, you know, could have been, my mother probably could have been a painter or something, and or a creative. Um, so yeah.
When you were singing at the fish fry, you probably didn't imagine that you would one day be on stage singing 9 to 5 with Dolly and Cheryl Crow.
Definitely not. Um, but I knew I wanted to go somewhere, go places. I've always been excited for the adventure, so.
In your dream scenario, who would you sing with on a nightly basis? Like if you put together a fantasy tour of like 5 living artists, who would be
Mm,
with you?
Man, that's really hard. Honestly, it wouldn't be anybody famous. I would love to tour with people that are well known, obviously, but I think it would be. I've always wanted to like recreate um, the Canadian train tour that the Dead and Joplin did. I've always thought that would be
Mm-hmm.
really fun, um, and do it with like, you know, 10 artists or something. Uh, that are all writing. There's just so many great artists out there. That's a really hard question. I'm not going to answer that.
Well, that's no fun. But yeah, I think the problem is that like a lot of the people that I love, especially, yeah, like do they have commercial viability and some sort of, ticket buying enterprise? I don't know,
A lot
Uh
of them don't. That the
yeah.
answer is no. I all the people I'm big like all my modern peers that I'm big fans of don't have big followings. They're not commercial, but they make fucking amazing music. Being being commercial does not mean great art necessarily. It can mean great art, obviously, but yeah. I mean, you know, I guess that question's hard for me because it's like, you know, I don't know. It could be so many beautiful artists that nobody would know, you know.
I think it would be fun to see that song Thinking on You with like a full orchestra at the Hollywood Bowl. Like I would like to see that for you.
Well, thank you.
Like,
That would be great. Let's make it happen.
like a fireworks show, like
Yeah.
John Williams conducting.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll call some people, see if we can pull some strings.
I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Where is your favorite venue to play right now?
Um, Favorite venue to play? Well, a venue that I've played the past couple years a couple times is the Union Chapel in London, which is just like this beautiful old chapel that just like doesn't even look real when you're in it. It's like
Hmm.
I've gotten to play some of those beautiful old places in Europe that I really love. Um, I always love playing. I just played the Troubadour in LA, which was a dream. I've always wanted to play the Troubadour. Um, yeah, there's a bunch of cool clubs that I, love frequenting.
Yeah, there is something about the Troubadour that, there's a few venues that somehow have retained a mystique or like an energy. Is it the best sounding room? No. Like, is it a super comfortable watch for an audience member? Not really. But it like feels important somehow when you're in there, like
Yeah,
something
I just think it's like the
awesome is going to
history.
happen.
Yeah, it's just like the history of it just makes it special, and that it's still running. There's like so few clubs with that history that are still open. Most of them have like closed, so it's pretty wild that it's still running. It's awesome.
Was there a show on maybe one of those early Greyhound tours or even recently where you felt like it was so bad that you questioned your life decisions?
Not on the Greyhound bus tours because those were like so early on that I didn't have any expectations, to be honest. But right before I made Honest Life, I went on this opening tour. Me and my ex rolled around in a Honda Accord, and we thought it was going to be this like, um, we thought it was going to be an opening tour, like where people were going to show up and stuff, and all of our deals were like door deals, so we didn't make any money because there was only like 2 to 5 people there, like every night.
Here's
And
$7.
yeah, exactly. And that was the first time that I can remember, and maybe the only time where I was like, what am I doing? And I think it was like, I think it's the expectation that always sets you up for disappointment. And I was also
Right.
like really broke at the time. I think I had like a couple $100s in my bank account and like could barely make the tour happen. And so, yeah, I think like that was the only time I can remember. And it was like a I want to give up moment. And then like literally that was when like maybe months later Honest Life came out. And it was like everything changed. So yeah, it was kind of just like a funny last kind of universe cackle, I guess.
It is amazing how many folks I've talked to where it's like right before they're about to give up, or like the album they put out. Who's that saying? Like Hiss Golden Messenger. Like he was like, yeah, this was my farewell album. This was like 10 years ago, like I
Yeah.
was, gonna go work as a tree, a tree architect, like
Yeah.
I trim trees and I still do that, but like I was actually just gonna go do that. And then all of a sudden people are like, oh, this guy's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a classic story.
Like maybe I should write a record where I like just be like, maybe this is my time to give up, but like
Yeah.
not actually give up.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of bands, are starting to be more honest about the really tough economic situation that we're put in with the
Yeah.
travel costs, with being an independent band, having to pay for all your own publicity and hotels and flights. And it's an impossible situation especially for bands that have a bunch of people in them. Like, you know, we've always had a 7-8 piece band, and that's just always the way it's been with brass and whatever. I realize that that's irresponsible at times, but that's like the energy that I want to put into the world.
Yeah.
And then you get slapped in the face with the result of less shows, less festivals at times, and then more of these costs. And like, I don't know how to juggle it a lot of times. And you can't like ask your fans to like help with that. That's not their responsibility.
Yeah.
It's not,
Yeah.
they're not responsible for the predicament you're in. So it's like, unless you have 300-400 people coming in every night, it's like hard to figure out how to make it economically viable, a lot of times.
Yeah.
Like, is there a
Yeah.
way for you to be like, how honest are you with your fans or your team about like what the real cost of being on the road is?
I mean, I think everybody's pretty aware. I'm in a place where I can do a band tour for a few months and then do a solo tour to like recoup, you know,
Yeah.
which is really helpful. But it, it's not always easy. You know, it's pretty hard for everyone right now.
Yeah.
Nobody's like, you know, maybe except for a few, like, raking it in or anything. But I'm honestly, I'm astounded that I get to do this. Like, to
Yeah.
okay, and if I could keep my, rent paid and that sort of thing, with what I do, then I don't know. It's pretty awesome.
Well, I think, like a song like Older Now maybe can remind us that the anxiety of ambition is not worth it sometimes. Like, you have to realize that, like, I am where I am right now. It's good enough. And actually, it's pretty good if
Yeah.
you can view it without the relentless expectation of more and more and more, you know?
Yeah, the more thing has gotten me in trouble, and it's gotten a lot of my artist friends in trouble, and it still does get me in trouble occasionally. But I feel like it's like a shift in mindset. Like, there are so many artists that would just absolutely love to be like able to pay their rent with art or music. So, it's good to strive for more, and I try always to strive for more, whatever that is, like more art, more connection, more like income, I guess. But the the end of the day, if you're making any income and you're an artist, that's pretty insane. Like, it's pretty like crazy. It's pretty crazy.
My mom would not like to hear this part of the conversation.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
like, yeah, but couldn't you maybe be on late night television? Wouldn't that help?
Yeah,
I'm like,
of course. Of course. These are all
I'm just
things.
gonna call up Jimmy Himmel.
Yeah.
He'll have us on.
Yeah.
But that line, I want to get it right this time in Older Now, I think signifies that, like, we tried a bunch of other stuff, right? We tried the relentless ambition. We tried the letting someone else dictate who we are or like how much we're worth, right?
Yeah.
Um, what do you think this album sort of says about where you are right now?
Hmm. Um, I look at Loose Future, it feels like I'm already past it hilariously because I've, written so many songs
Right.
since Future, but to me, the record really felt like a doorway. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was standing between what's what's been my life up to that moment and what's coming, And it kind of opened up a world for me of like possibility. That any kind of record is worth kind of pursuing, and yeah, any sort of creative endeavor is worth pursuing. And so to me it feels like, in both and in love too, like my hesitance and my fear, falling in with somebody with, my past and all that sort of thing. Like it just feels like a doorway. It feels like I'm reckoning with my past, but like looking to the future, and I'm trying to enjoy now with those two things kind of like one on the outside, one on the inside. So,
Is there an artist that we wouldn't expect you to be obsessed with that like is in your like weekly listening habits?
um, Frank Sinatra,
All right.
The Cure.
I like those back to back. It's a fun.
I'm obsessed with Frank Sinatra.
There's that screening room at USC that I remember seeing a movie at. It's like the Frank Sinatra, like I don't know why, for some reason he paid for the screening room, and it's just got all of his gold records from the floor to the ceiling, like this 20-foot wall.
Wow.
You're just like, whoa.
Okay, let's spread the love a little.
You're like, man.
Yeah.
All right, last question. You can have a duet with a ghost. Any artist who has passed on from this world, you can record a song with them. Who would that artist be?
Mickey Newberry.
Oh, who's that?
Oh, so good. Just like a beautiful writer and singer from the 70s, 60s, 70s.
That was an immediate answer.
Mm-hmm. Good
Look
one.
look up that name, folks. This is what this show is for. It's an educational project.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for jumping on, and
Yeah.
I really appreciate the art you're making, and I can't wait to see what comes out of those 30 songs you just wrote.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course.
We'll talk
Have a
soon.
good one.
You too.
Bye
Bye.
bye.